So welcome back, and welcome back everyone that is connected online as well. I am so happy, and I want to congratulate as well of selections of keynoters because it is amazing how much it resonates with the project and how well connected it is with all the roundtable. We will see now again. In this roundtable, it is about extremist narratives with science. We have as participants Katalin Miklóssy, Sergi and Matteo Albanese that's connected online. And I am substituting Christina, maybe you wonder, because of the schedule. And before starting giving the floor to the experts in the panel, I would like to present an introduction that she wrote, and I think she defines perfectly the stances of how extremist narratives relate to science. First, it's crucial to understand that when we speak of science in this panel, we are referring to all different strands of science, including the social sciences, humanities, and natural sciences. That's not taken for granted usually, so I think it is a great explanation. We will debate science not just from the point of the scientific production as such, and its use in extremist narratives, but we will dwell in particular into the perception of science by different actors, the role and positioning of science in the socio-political landscape, and the various forces that shape the focus of scientific research, its output and dissemination of findings. Of course, from a discursive point of view, I mean, this is exactly what we need to debate. In this respect, we shall pay attention to social political constraints on scientific inquiry, the perception but also implications of the institutionalized nature of scientific work, as well as the power dynamics surrounding particular scientists. Second, an important starting position for this panel is also that science has always played a significant role in the construction of nations and states, and we have been hearing that over and over again as well during our conference. While science has been, of course, largely perceived as a tool for enlightenment and liberation from unreasonable societal constraints, funny enough, again, a reference to enlightenment, its observations were and still are as well exploited by those seeking to advance extremist agendas. Such agendas, constructed via extremist narratives, have in particular found ways to harness the authority of science to further their worldview. Again, I mentioned the Overton window. On the hand, extremist narratives may highlight the appeal to reason, using scientific arguments to lend credibility to their ideas. On the other hand, they may weaponize emotions, demonizing scientific findings, and contradict their views and undermining the legitimacy of scientific inquiry altogether. In this way, science can be both a supporter and a hindrance to the construction of national identity. Third, and last aspect, is about the different ways science can be exploited by extremist groups. Namely, as the presentations will point out, the exploitation of scientific work by extremist groups can be both reactive and proactive. When extremist narratives are based on reactive stance, they produce counter-arguments to discredit inconvenient scientific findings that counter their selected point of view. We have already heard about some reframing or some scientific advancement. But when extremist narratives are based on proactive stance, they work towards constructing alternative scientific narratives in order to create parallel realities and align with their extremist views and challenge the internationally accepted scientific consensus. So today, we will discuss how science is used and misused in extremist narratives through the lens of different national cases. To this end, I have the pleasure to be joined by the presenters who will provide us with insights with the complex relationship between science, society, and the forces that seek to manipulate knowledge for ideological ends. And Now, I will give the floor first to Katalin Miklóssy. She is a rule of law scholar currently affiliated with the University of Helsinki. She is a political scientist who specializes in the political and legal history of Eastern Europe, with a focus on the changes that occurred in authoritarian systems, especially in the countries of the Visegrad Group and in Southeast Europe. Today, she will talk about the institutional dimension embedded in the practice of science. Please, Katalin.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. First of all, I will not introduce any national case, but I will talk more about general views of how institutions are significant in extremist attacks on science, and how enemy images are constructed in regarding science. So when I talk about institutional framework, I mean here is university, research institutes, think tanks, most clearly about universities and research institutes. But of course, it goes without saying that infrastructure, the research infrastructure or science infrastructure is much wider. But now I will concentrate on institutions. Now, why institutions matter? I will argue that there are two reasons why institutions like universities are targeted by extremist narratives or critics on science. First, because science is produced within institutional framework ever since the 18th, 19th century. We need a community around which the institutions are constructed. But I will also argue that actually, even though that production of knowledge is important, nevertheless, the other role of institutions are much more important regarding extremist narratives. And this is the institutions are mediating science. So it means practically that we are, creating the next generation of intellectuals in universities. So we are teaching research-based science to or research-based education. We are to students. Now it means that we are creating the next generation of intellectuals, middle-class people, politicians, entrepreneurs, and so on. So this is one important social significance why we are attacked. On the other hand, we are mediating science also to the public. So through publications, through the media, through popularizing activity. So this is perhaps even more important. What is the social role of institutions, particularly universities, in society? Now, because this is a panel also, or this is a conference about the historical roots, I will point out the two most common discourses aiming to undermine the credibility of institutionalized science. Now, the first is regarding the space of institutional structure. The institutions are full of contradictions, which is why it is an easy target, an easy subject for extremist blame game. So first, I will bring in a kind of old discourse, an old contradiction between the national and international phenomena embedded in institutions. And this national versus international debate is basically a kind of legitimacy discourse regarding national legitimacy. So science per se is relying on international exchange of ideas. Here we are. So it is all research is assessed by international community. Scientific breakthroughs are valorized by international evaluation. So far, so good. But on the other hand, institutions like this is situated in a national context. So funding for any national institution are coming from the national budget, from the government, but the governments change because it is about the political balance of the state. So it means that political will can change as well regarding how important a university is, how important the research delivered by the university. So national interest regarding research, regarding the research that represents certain values. We just heard a kind of left-wing understanding of science, which I wouldn't be disagreeing more, but anyway, so being as a kind of liberal scientist. Nevertheless, national interest regarding values, worldviews, goals are changing. So, but on the other hand, we have international agencies channeling resources like arenas. We got funding from the European Council. So it means that sometimes international agency funding and the prospect of this funding driving certain political goals, political values, can contradict with the national goals of science. So, but on the other hand, I think this is also a kind of this international versus national contradiction goes back long to history. So first of all, of course, I'm working mostly on the eastern part of the EU and somewhat also on, which is also an eastern part, Finland. But nevertheless, in European states that lacked colonial past, were often subdued under great empires like Russia, the Habsburgs, Ottomans, in the 19th century, at the same time when nationalism as a new idea was just taking over the arena. Now, all these small countries harnessed science to serve the construction of the concept of the nation. So modern disciplines in the 19th century had a very practical goal in these so-called small countries, under empires or autonomous small nation states already in the 19th century. So the practical goal was to study the national phenomena. So, and it meant also providing a convincing argument for the nation-building project. So that is why, actually, the science that we have in nation states have very much embedded in the national agenda. On the other hand, many of these states were under empire rule, which meant that the national universities, the national agenda universities were just taking on, were a threat to imperial governments. So for example, for Finland or for Poland, in the Russian Empire, the crown prince had the task to mentor and overlook universities in the 19th century. Because the empires and the centers of empires were afraid that the new elite in the making of these universities, in the academia, would further the national cause and weakened the empire. So universities in empires were founded as long as they were not the hotbed of revolutions. So already at that time, in the 19th century, individual academics were monitored politically. And of course, after the First World War, it changed again. because all of a sudden the empires disappeared and the nation state were all around us. The whole European map was redrawn. So in the interwar period, science or the role of this institutional framework was once again dedicated to the national agenda. But everything changed after the Second World War, when half of Europe was occupied by Stalin. So the international framework, institutional framework was restructured to serve the international goal. International goal defined by ideology, communists, and by the communist system. And I would argue that for the long 40 years in the eastern part of the EU, actually, under communism, destroyed the trust of people in institutions, in academic institutions. But then, after the collapse of communism, there came another international pressure, and it was Europeanization of institutions. So all of a sudden, all the national agenda that was thought for many academics over the communist period was now once again marginalized to from the agenda of Europeanization. So coming from this perspective, actually, the revival of nationalist cause is a kind of delayed process, and it was just a matter of time that would come. So, and this is the same with today, and particularly in the extremist narratives, which is a problem for me because I'm working on Poland and Hungary, and all of a sudden we can realize that extremist narratives is already mainstreamed in the last 10, 15 years. So what extreme means is also a kind of conceptual mirage, which means that we need to redefine what extremism is. Is it a process that is, moving forward and having new shapes within institutions as well? But nevertheless, so today the EU is pictured as a colonial power, a new colonial power, which means that from certain political groups' perspectives and from certain governments' perspectives, like in Hungary or once upon a time in Poland as well, but now in Slovakia, these are setting up foreign values on the national institutions and emphasizing. And there are once again a contradiction that this international pressure is emphasizing what to study, that runs counter what the national jurisdiction over these institutions is about. Now, 10? Yeah. Okay, very quickly, sorry. The other discourse is just very shortly about urban versus countryside, which is a kind of modernity discourse regarding university and institutions. This is about the gap between science and people. This is about the 19th century discussion about the ivory tower that is inconceivable from the common man. Now, academic institutions are always embedded in urban environment. And urban spaces from the 19th century onwards has been always cosmopolitan, non-national, liberal. Institutions universities are open-minded, represented by the middle class mostly, fast-changing, multicultural. People moved from different socio-economic and cultural background into the capital or into the urban spaces. Now, the countryside, on the other hand, represented not only the genuine society, but also the genuine knowledge, the peasant mind, the common sense, the pure logic, the problem-solving capacity in comparison of the artificial, too complex, and too debatable academic knowledge. I think I will stop here and we can... discuss it later about the social impact of this.
So we leave a lot of content for possible questions from the public. Thank you so much. Definitely is a great first common ground for this round table. So we will jump now to the use of the concept of freedom in extremist narratives, where freedom is often represented as being jeopardized by the scientists and scientific findings. This topic will be discussed more by Sergi Soler, who is a researcher with a background in contemporary history, affiliated with the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and currently focuses on his research on political communication and comparative history. Sergi?
So, thank you everyone for being here. And first of all, I wanted to start saying that when I was invited to be here in this panel, and I realized that I was going to speak after Katalin and before Matteo, I said, okay, how can I make a presentation that's interesting enough and does not make me look like a fool, speaking between these two great experts? So considering that my research is about concepts and the power of concepts, I thought that it was maybe a good idea to make this relationship between freedom and science, how it is related, how does it work, and more specifically, how far-right groups or agents use freedom to attack science. So I'm really happy that Camille talked about a bit of context, gave about a little bit of context about the blue planet, the planet Azul of Aznar, because the relationship between freedom and science goes way back. But I want to focus more on the present day because our generation had to live a situation really tough. And in my opinion, that redefined the concept of freedom and the importance of the word of freedom. And that's the COVID lockdown that we didn't treat really in depth in this Congress. And I know it's sad and nobody wants to hear about this, but I think it's good to contextualize a little bit, just a few seconds, how bad it was, the pandemic and the lockdown and the restrictions, and how it affected us as a society and how it pushed us to our limits. It didn't matter if you were for or against the restrictions, we all wanted them to end, we all wanted to return back to normal. And there were some politicians that took advantage of that saw this social moment and used this freedom to attack everything related to science, and especially a politician that was not really important by the time in Spain. Of course, she was relevant, but she was not near as relevant as she is today, and that's Isabel Díaz Ayuso, who appeared in 2019 with the Comunismo o Libertad slogan that link directly to the COVID restrictions. So she kind of used the desperation in a lot of people to promise freedom and to promise the end of every restriction, neglecting every scientific recommendation. So how does this translate politically, and how was it like the narrative that they built? They basically told you that science, or this science, was not true, that this science was a political tool, this science was not reliable, and that you should not listen to this science because it followed a political agenda, not the scientific method or anything like that. So basically, they took this context and they took all these ideas, and they started attacking a lot more, not only the things related to COVID, but they took this opportunity and also attacked climate change. They also attacked, for example, I remember a lot of controversy with the Green Pass. I remember also this, I have in my mind these images about when the minister, Alberto Garzón, recommended, based on scientific findings, then to reduce the consumption of red meat. And at the next day, all of the far-right and right politicians were taking pictures eating red meat just to contradict and use this. And using this, he's trying to take away our freedom. This science is not science. This is politics, and they are trying to take away our freedom. So I chose this image because I think it depicts really well everything that the far right standed against. This is a demonstration during the pandemic in 2020, and you can see that it was promoted by Vox. Here is the truck, the Vox truck. You can easily identify it because it has 1,000 trillion Spanish flags. And they promoted this manifestation, and it was during the lockdown, against the restrictions, and they also took the chance to fill the cities with cars. So they were against the climate change, the COVID restrictions. It was against all restrictions recommended by science. So what happens after that? After months and months and months and even years of constant attacks against scientific knowledge and against science, well, skepticism starts entering the mainstream public, and certain conspiracy theories start appearing or getting more popular. And it got to a point where even the IMED, which is one of the most prestigious institutions in Spain about meteorology and everything, had to make public announcements about that the chemtrails were fake, that the chemtrails didn't exist, because a lot of contradictions were coming up because the far right were saying, no, climate change is fake. They are trying to fool you. No, this is not real. But at the same time, yes, they are poisoning us with planes. So even the IMED, because a lot of people told the IMED, okay, but why do you do you go so low to negate this, which is absurd? And the IMED explained that a lot of people were coming to them privately asking if this was true, because they were actually worried. So a lot of people were actually worried about the chemtrails and were afraid and were wearing masks still because maybe this is true, maybe we're getting poisoned. So they felt forced to make a public announcement that it was completely fake, and they had to do a completely pedagogical explanation about how the planes worked and everything. So it got to a point that it was pretty ridiculous. Other contradictions that we can see in this far-right discourse is this contradiction about idealizing the life on the countryside, but at the same time negating the climate change that is destroying this very countryside. No, so also Vox, taking advantage of your presentation, Katalin, on institutions, that was great. Vox also took the chance to attack a lot of these institutions. The IMED, for example, again, and they were attacks that were also related with the economic part of the situation, because these are public institutions, right? So they are getting public money. So I bet far-right parties wouldn't also be happy with arenas and every institution like that. And they threaten to defund the IMED, for example, if they got in power, right? So all in all, to wrap it up, what do we have? We have a constant attack against scientific knowledge and scientific progress that slowly starts moving a little bit the Overton window, so it starts getting into the mainstream public, and it starts spreading little by little. So we have a cocktail that could be really dangerous, because more and more people start adopting scientific procedures. Maybe, oh yes, I took the 2 first vaccines, but maybe the third, I don't know, I don't take it, you know. So I think we really need to take care about that. And of course, this is a work in progress. This is evolving still. So we really need to keep an eye on those attacks and try to fight back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh. Yes.
It was a national.
Exactly. Far from looking like a fool. So if we talked about the ways how science is used to promote the idea of an even more limited freedom of the citizens, our next presenter will dive further into how extremist groups use science in their discourse promoting extremist views and how they manage to use contradictions about science to their benefit. I would like to give the floor to Matteo Albanese, who is a historian currently affiliated with the University of Padua and the Institute of Social Sciences in Lisbon. His research interests lie especially in the history of political parties and movements that promote extremist and neo-fascist ideas. Please, Matteo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Katalin and Sergi for the presentation that they gave just before me, because they gave me a lot of ideas, but I will stick to what I'm trying to present today. I would like to say that, first of all, I'm going to present you a national case in this few minutes I have about me. The national case are represented by two Italian organizations. The first one is Casa Pound, the second one is Forza Nuova. It's extremely important to narrow down the field and to say that both of them openly claim themselves as neo-fascist organization. So we are in the realm of neo-fascism, Italian neo-fascism in this case. It's always extremely interesting to say that both Casa Pound and Forza Nuova do have international relationship in Europe and also across the ocean in the United States. And both of them, especially just to connect with what Sergi was saying, during the COVID period, during the pandemic period, they found a new strength for their anti-scientific discourse. In which way? First of all, it is important to say that as Casa Pound is, and Forza Nuova have differences between the two of them. Forza Nuova is a traditional neo-fascist ultra-Catholic organization. Casa Pound is a traditional neo-fascist spiritualist organization. I hope it's quite clear what I meant with spiritualism is that stream of extreme right-wing and neo-fascist ideology that refers directly to Julius Evola and neo-Nazism. So are two different streams of ideologies within neo-fascism and extreme right-wing and right-wing extremism. Sorry. In that case, the idea that they promote about science is something that is extremely related with what Katalin was saying about limitation. Science is something that should be submitted to ethics and to moral and in the end to politics. In the case of Forza Nuova is because we directly respond to God and to the church. So we do have above us the idea of God and the idea of the nature that God created for us, and we cannot go outside the boundaries of religion. In the idea of Casa Pound is because we do have historical borders that have been created and that created a tradition, and we cannot go beyond that borders, otherwise we enter into another realm, the realm of fiction. Is not true anymore, because and here we go to the second level of the analysis, is not only that we do have boundaries and limitation, one is more connected to Catholicism and the other one is more connected with tradition, but it's just that the rules that we are following are real and they are dictated by the nature. So they created this dichotomy, which we can find already in the 20s and then again before the 20s in the works of Martin Heidegger, and not only Martin Heidegger, about science and the nature. On one side, we do have the nature who dictated the way in which men should live and organize their society. On the other hand, we do have this mythology of science, this idea of Prometheus who wants to defy nature, who wants to win against the nature, who wants to create a different kind of society with different rules, which somehow are going to corrupt the soul of the man. Because the role of politics, the main role of politics is to preserve the purity of the souls and the bodies. Science is something that interacts with the bodies and the souls of the men with corruption, because they want to create something which is different. In this case, it's not that difficult to understand how during the last pandemic crisis, the idea of vaccination was extremely easily to exploit for whom, like Casa Pound and Forza Nuova, did have this kind of background, saying, you see, they want to inoculate in your body something alien, something which doesn't belong to nature. And in doing that, they are going to introduce within your body something that it couldn't be there. Simply, if you leave the illness to run its course, you are going to develop your own natural antibodies and you're not going to get sick. But if something from outside and from science arrives, there are only two possible explanations. On one side, this coming from outside, it's something they are going to corrupt who you are, your body and your soul. And this is the first level of criticism. We cannot trust the scientists, we cannot trust the vaccination because we don't know what they're going to inoculate. The second point is, why are they doing that? And as Sergi was saying about the conspiracy theory, if science is a fiction, the purpose of this fiction is to manipulate people. So to push people away from the nature, from the natural laws, which are the only ones that can preserve your body and your soul, pure, like God or like the mother nature gave you. And in order to manipulate you, they will insert within the vaccination microchips. This is one of the most common theories that extreme right wing used to address against the vaccination in Italy, but not only in Italy. And they also made, this fantastic kind of turmoil, like they insert microchip in the vaccine in order to control you. The only way to preserve at that point, not only your body, but the collective body, pure, so the defense of the nation, the defense of the motherland, is to oppose the science. I would like to close, and I hope I've been brief enough, with another suggestion that Katalin gave to me. You were saying that, the idea of putting the science under the political control, it's something that it happens always. We can trace it back in the 15th century. But apart from that, the idea of in which way extremist narration are becoming mainstream. It's news of a few weeks ago. The Italian extreme right-wing government decided to run a parliamentary national commission of inquiry on COVID because they want to know exactly what happened, who take profit from the vaccination. I mean, all these kind of discourses became suddenly a public and political initiative of Giorgia's Meloni government. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ooh, again. Well, I will fix it.
Exactly that.
Yeah, it's okay. Hearing the speakers, I always think how interesting it is and how difficult it is to separate our three topics in arena, and how much they are intertwined, how difficult it is to understand them as three different topics when they allude each other constantly about, like how science, gender, nation are all the time intertwining, and how the different narratives, if I may, are repeating roundtable after roundtable, changing the topics. One of them, it is about limitations. It's one of the questions that come over and over again. And in this particular case, these limitations are imposed on science and scientists by funding bodies, as Katalin particularly stated, available methods and ethics in general, as we were commenting actually now, with the topic of freedom, or for example, the natural order of things. But we also heard about limitations that are imposed by science or scientific findings on society. So, what limitations would you say have proved beneficial or rather detrimental in the practice of science through history? And what do you think of these limitations in this respect in general? Who would like to start answering? So,
Okay.
thank you.
So, what a question. This is a really complex topic. I don't know if it's possible even to answer. I think it's more possible to have a good debate about this. I don't know if it is possible to reach a conclusion, because you can approach this question by so many different angles. Like, Yara just told you about the natural order of things, very related to what Matteo was saying, and the purity of the body. And Matteo's presentation actually gave me an idea about this, or more than an idea, another example of these limitations, ethics, values, morals, and science. And it's about Testigos de Jehová. Jehovah Witnesses that have this problem issue with blood transfusions, for example, right? And we have a lot of cases of blood transfusions done to sons of Jehovah Witnesses that were ruled out by judges because the parents didn't allow these transfusions. So I would say that's a pretty bad limitation, but there are a lot of approaches. And we also mentioned how related are all the three arenas main topics. And I think we can also draw a line of connection between science and gender. Yesterday we had a really, really, really good panel about gender that also gave me a lot of ideas, because between the extremist movements on the right spectrum side, we still have a lot of differences. For example, it's not the same if you are talking to an extremist neoliberal or an anarcho-capitalist than to a completely radical Catholic. Like, it's not the same. And they will give you completely different arguments to the same question. For example, if we're talking about science and gender, can we talk about in vitro? Can we talk about surrogacy? All of that is science. But a neoliberal will say you, yeah, all good, go ahead. And an ultra-Catholic will say, no, none of this is possible. So I think this is a really, really complex subject and can be treated from very different perspectives and very different ways. I don't know what you think.
Yeah.
So, Katalin?
Yeah. I could continue that. Well, I'm a political scientist, so from where I stand or sit, everything is political. So since gender is politicized, it is also a question how institutions or national funding agencies are channeling resources to certain research that is either aligned with the national interest or not. So in this sense, for example, in Hungary, gender studies has been, done. It's already forbidden. And instead, they invented family studies. So this is about how gender is so political that the national funding agencies has decided not to support it. But I would like also to bring in another issue. Now, university or institutions, academic institutions, are embedded in the social the society. So when society is polarizing, the university is a subsystem. So eventually it will hit us. So already we can see that academia university institutions are polarizing within. We don't need extremist threat from the outside. We do a pretty good job ourselves. So, but on the other hand, so the good thing is that we are talking about, I'm talking about institutions and institutionalized science. Now, institutions are invented for a reason, because institutions bring stability and securing continuity, the modus operandi, by direct or indirect rules, behavior patterns, hierarchies, and a lot. So the idea idea of stability is that it will survive political changes, right? So this is a strength. On the other hand, the weakness of this kind of politicized institution is that it can hinder change. It can hinder the change of ideas, of concepts, of research at the same time, why stability can be also a good thing. So I think the most important pro is ethics. Limitations on research is ethics, because this is the idea of honest and fair conduct. So it is ethics will maintain the integrity what is left from the science, because I think the most dangerous mirage is that we have this dream that there is a freedom of science. I mean, wake up, people. When was freedom of science actually reality, ever? So I will also bring in the politicalness. So is politicalness a beneficial or detrimental for science? So just an example. I'm working in the University of Helsinki, and in Finland we have this existential threat because of the war in Ukraine. But what did it do? So on one hand, we reinvented in academia political correctness, which means that we even have a kind of instruction, academic instruction, how to call the crisis in Ukraine. It is not the war in Ukraine, or it is not Ukrainian war, it is the Russian aggression on Ukraine, right? So this is a kind of new dogma that we are engaged with. And it is, yes, it becomes also a polarizing discourse, because if Ukraine, we stand by Ukraine, if we have Ukraine, Ukraine is blameless. It is a victim. A victim is blameless, and if Ukraine is blameless, it cannot be criticized. So all of a sudden, we have taboos within academia, because you cannot touch, you cannot teach, and you cannot popularize unwanted research regarding this conflict. So crisis is changing academia always, one way or the other, because politicalness become more influential within science and within the production of science. So, but on the other hand, crisis is good. So for instance, because of the war, people cannot go to fieldwork. If you cannot go to fieldwork, you reinvent methodology and reinvent theories and reinvent data. So it can have a huge impact on progress, scientific progress. So Yes, and crisis is good because it redirects funding for Ukrainian studies. We all of a sudden realized that we don't have know-how in the West. So we prepped up new Ukrainian studies centers because we need to know what's going on. So there is a huge academic infrastructure is developing around this. I mean, crisis is good. So, and crisis is good because it can pinpoint the outdated concepts. We are still hanging on. We are liberal, right? And what I asked Camille, that the liberal paradox is that we hang on until the very end, old concepts, because we are liberal. So that's I think the most dangerous of all. On one hand, crisis, and particularly the increasing politicalness that we encounter at the moment.
I think we should have a task on academic freedom in Arenas. Actually, hearing, yes, I know, Matteo, it is your turn. I was just going to say that I received an email from the University of Düsseldorf hearing about the polarization arriving at the university and communication of science. There is a new unit that will give us some guidelines in case that we are somehow assaulted or attacked when communicating science. So they actually developed guidelines regarding how to, proceed in those cases, which is quite an interesting framing itself. Sorry, Matteo, go for it.
No, absolutely. We did have the same kind of problem in Italy a few years ago. A couple of our seminars were being public seminars. I mean, we were trying to disseminate the data of some research that being interrupted by, extreme right-wing groups. It happened as well. But apart from that, it would be extremely easy for me to say, of course, there are moments in history when limitations of science came on the stage, one and for all. I mean, eugenetics, racism, for example. Until the 20s, the 30s, it was quite normal to speak about race when we describe humans. I mean, humans were divided into races at the end of the 19th century. We discovered something else afterwards, but beforehand also there was, this idea that after the Second World War and after the disaster of the Second World War, the idea itself of race should be, eliminated from the scientific discourse. Again, another case when ethics became predominant on scientific discourse, it was the abolition of the death penalty. At the very beginning in Florence, when the death penalty was cancelled, it was for humanitarian and ethical reasons. Afterwards, science demonstrates that such kind, of behavior from the state, it wasn't even efficient in terms of diminishing the number of crimes. There are many examples when, ethics, politics came into the academic and scientific discourse. Just to remind one of them, one night, it was the end of the 15th century, quite a famous king, Charles V, used to ask to Bernard de las Casas, do these Native American guys we are conquering have a soul? Because he was Catholic, and he knew that the Spanish conquista, the Spanish conquer of Central and Latin America was killing a lot of people, and he was extremely afraid if all those killings became a burden upon his soul as the king. The answer of Bernardo de las Casas became the very beginning of what we call nowadays rule of law and international law. So again, it's extremely difficult to put a line when we begin and when we start to not to limitate, but to debate science also, in politics. As Katalin was saying, everything is politics. So it's extremely difficult to say when academia has been stopped, or if it was the other way around. I mean, even during Italian fascism, which was one of the most, oppressive moment in history of my country, Benedetto Croce was able to write down, the manifesto of intellectuals against fascism, which it has been presented as an extremely important act of freedom in that moment. But most of our scientists at that time, including Guglielmo Marconi, which nowadays is, very famous in Italy, he was a fascist. So the connection between regimes and science and the limitations are always extremely complicated. But they're not always bad.
Thank you so much. We are gonna open now the turn of questions to the public. So if someone has some questions, some comments, some debate, here we have one. I have as well one. Yes. I think. Yeah.
Hola. ¿Se oye? Sí. In English. It came to my mind what you said about the COVID and the impact that had on us as generation or generations, because, and something that you said as well about credibility, which is the main or the key thing, according to me, in why science is not respected or believed in our society. It comes to my mind this phrase of Groucho Marx, like, who are you going to believe, you or your own eyes or me? Yeah. So the key thing today is, who are you going to believe? So why so many people who have even been on a university studies go to an influencer and believe the fuck what they say? Just out of nowhere. And I saw that in the pandemics, because we have a group of people of my own age that they all have university studies. And when we came to debate vaccines and many things, some of them were anti-vaccines, and some of them even believed that drinking bleach could cure you or whatever. And those people were architects, those people were lawyers, those people were engineers who had been to technical and scientific careers, and they didn't have the fucking idea, sorry, excuse my French, about the scientific method.
Yeah.
They didn't know how it worked. They didn't know how the hypothesis, experiment, result, and basic statistics, or even logical fallacies. They didn't know what a logical fallacy, and they were using them all the time, and not knowingly. I mean, like other people do, like Trump or other people, but they were using them, and so my point is, what I see around all the time is the lack of criterion to know what is true or not, what is scientific or not, because people, they go through these university studies, they come out of them with a degree, and they have no idea about basic things of science and of logic, of knowledge. So maybe education is the point. Well, what do you think?
Actually, that relates a lot to the question I had as well. So I will take advantage and put it there on the floor as well. So how can scientists actually, especially historians, contribute to a reconciliation of this polarized view of science? And how should we understand the notion of true science? So that is another questioning of this framing. Do we have any other questions so we can... Yes. There.
I have a question for Katalin. You were speaking about the creation of the nation in Europe, and you were saying that there were many differences between the countries that had no imperial past and those which had imperial past, and that science played a very big role.
Yeah.
Do you think that religion also played a big role in this creation of the nations, and to what degree? And did it affect more in imperial nations or in not imperial nations?
That's a good
Okay.
one.
We have
Yeah. You can go on.
another question, so and then we will start with the answers. Jure?
Thank you. Excellent panel. Thank you all very much. Katalin, I very much agree with you that you focus so much on the institutions, because nowadays you cannot do any research without a proper institution. In the early 20th century, it was possible that you have one scholar, one brilliant scholar doing some research, especially in our field. But right now, that's impossible, especially not in the natural sciences and engineering. You need large research infrastructures, and this is also European and worldwide trend. We will have even bigger and more important institutions. Everything will happen within these institutions. So the question is now, what to do with these institutions if politics, government in a one country or in a one continent decides that, well, something has to be changed, because research institutions had to have certain autonomy. If they don't have it, well, should be a problem or not? Because, as you suggested, well, this also could be challenging. Okay, could have positive effects. But let's take a look at Hungary, for example. You have several universities in Hungary that cannot participate in the Horizon Europe program. Why? Because of their governance model, because some members of the board of trustees were handpicked by Viktor Orban's government. So, brilliant researchers working there, which I suppose do not even vote for Fidesz, cannot cooperate in a wider European research area, cannot be part of Arena's project, for example. This is how European Commission responds. Okay, they also have some other instruments, widening instruments. They want to foster autonomy of the institutions. They're providing money for that. So this is more like a comment. European Commission is very much aware of this problem, and they're approaching this problem. Even Draghi approaches this problem. So I mean, it's quite a positive news, if you ask me. But still, concrete actions they often do, at least it's my opinion, are often not very productive.
Yeah.
And Anna, Yara, just to add to your question, what can we as historians do? Well, I talked a lot to immunologists, doctors, and our researchers in Slovenia during the pandemic, and some were really shocked. Hey, people don't believe us. I mean, we're explaining everything on the TV. We are explaining very popular scientific way what's behind it, but people still do not believe us. I told them, hey, I mean, that's happening to us historians researching contemporary history on a daily basis. That's nothing new for us. I mean, it happens to me all the time that someone calls me, hey, you're writing about a dissolution of Yugoslavia. You don't know, I was there in the 1991. I'll tell you how it was. We're really experts for that.
Thank you. I think Katalin can start.
First, what is science? 100 years ago, there was a medical consensus that smoking a cigar is good for your lungs because it strengthens your lung, right? 100 years ago. And it was top-notch scientific result. So science, in my opinion, and we should take it into consideration, science is progressing in time. We just know that what we know today, and it is perhaps not, philosopher's stone, right? So what I mean is that, for example, we have a colleague in Arenas who said that she won't take a vaccine because she doesn't know the side effects. The vaccines were very quickly developed in short time, and it was not tested well, profoundly, let's say. So there is also a kind of other kind of scientific view. But you are absolutely right that extremist movement is not about, you know, hillbillies. It is about also the middle class, well-educated people who decided to go another way. So it is, you are absolutely right that we are stunned. But on the other hand, I give you another example. Statistics, as close as you can get to mathematics, right? 2.2. And if you change the indicators, it will give you a completely different results. And it is still science, right? So once again, we should be careful to judge. I mean, all those, all those who don't, I don't know, an old staunch liberal. So I will say that I think it would be important to listen what is their point in understanding. And what Yara said, I think it is important that international institutions and the national institutions, the EU is polarizing the discourse itself. So it is just, you know, and it will not take us to the next level because we are still stuck with the same contradiction all over again. And it is our fault that we don't invent a new narrative in order to tackle this old one. Because of this camera obscura, black and white, it is not taking us further. So it is just polarizing even deeper. And for you, I think it is a very fair point. Now, I think in the national project, religion played a part. But in regarding the institutional infrastructure and more particularly universities, they were not that much impacted in the 19th century as they became, let's say, in the 1980s in the Eastern Bloc. For example, Poland was one of the brilliant examples how Catholic Church had an influence on the solidarity movement and the academics as well. And just to Yara, to another point coming from this is we have in political science small islands of democracy, right? So in this sense, I believe that within the institutions, there are small islands of democratic understanding of academics, even though that they are limited by the framework. So.
Thank you. By the way, let's make it a dialogue as well between you panelists. So if you want to answer or comment each other, yes, go for it. So, Sergi?
Yes, I want to talk a bit about the first question you made about why the fuck they trust these narratives. And the first thing I want to say is that I think that you will really enjoy the panel we have after lunch about circulation of narratives, because we explain a lot of those things there. But I will get a little bit ahead of myself and try to explain some of the things.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Related to the lockdown, because I think that this started to come really strong during and after the lockdown. So I told in my first presentation that the pandemic really affected us. And I think I would like to talk a little bit here about ethics and morals and values, because ethics and morals and values, I feel like everyone has their ethics and their morals, but a lot of people, I feel like they follow these ethics and these morals when they are easy to follow, and when things get tough, maybe it's not so convenient anymore. So it's not like a conviction; it's more like convenient ethics and morals. right? So on the one hand, you have science that is telling you that you should ideally spend 3 more months at home. And on the other hand, you have an influencer that is saying that this is a lie, that this doesn't exist. Okay. Common sense or critical thinking would make you think that most people would agree with the scientist. But I feel like in this moment of desperation, you forget about your values, you forget about your morals, you forget about your ethics, and you only want your freedom. So, in my opinion, I feel like it's not like they don't trust you. It's more like they refuse to trust you. And they hold on to anything that you give them to live their lives and to get on with it and to cope with all that is happening. This has a lot of approaches, and this is why we study narratives, because narratives play a big part in this. And also, of course, you talked about this, social media, and the intoxication that social media gives to this everything, because everything gets like mixed in the same ecosystem. So you don't really know if you are not really like if you're not really willing to contrast everything. You don't really know who to trust and who not to trust. So you have also politicians that criticize all institutions, and politicians are supposedly, let's say, authorities you could listen to. And you have, on the one hand, politicians that say trust the institutions, and on the other hand, you have also another political option that says, no, you don't have to trust institutions. You can trust us. Exactly. So there are a lot of things. There's a sentence that I like a lot that says that all people have because you talk about education, and there's a sentence that goes like, everyone has common sense, but not everyone has critical thinking. And maybe we lack some critical thinking. And you say, how come that really educated people trust these narratives? Well, maybe they don't have that critical thinking. Maybe universities, maybe we should also self-blame us a little bit as academicals and say, and said, maybe we're not teaching enough critical thinking. I come from the degree in humanities, and I ended up my degree really happy. And when I told to other people from other degrees, and then we had conversations, I was thinking, I believe that humanities should be like the first thing you do when you go to your university. And then after you've done humanities and you've trained your critical thinking and everything, then you go do whatever you want. But first, let's take this step, right? So that's my opinion.
I can explain my case. I did a physics degree.
The mic.
My case, and I don't think it's something unique. I did a degree in physics, and I never learned the scientific method in my degree. I learned it by reading some other things in philosophy, but it's true, and no one in my degree learned it. So we learned the theories, but we didn't know the philosophy or the logical structure that laid underground under it. So. And many people, I guess it was in my case, around the world. So I agree with you. We should learn some basics in philosophy and logics and in how science works, in philosophy of science, and then learn the technical and the scientific degrees.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, we have time. Yes, I was going to say, first, Matteo, for this round, I know. Thank you. For this round of questions, and then we have other 3 questions I saw. Thank you. Matteo?
Yes. How can we historian working on polarization and on, all the matters that have been put on the table, which are a lot. First of all, I always suggest the read of Anderson, the invention of tradition. I mean, not only science, but also the tradition that politicians use every day are invented through history. A lot of things are invented. Some of you just quoted the fact that the contemporary historians, especially who works on the East, are used to be not trusted. I mean, we are now working at the University of Padova on a specific research about the East side during the Second World War and the East Front. So it's extremely complicated. And again, a lot of things are completely invented and completely fake. Like, for example, we struggle on the idea that there were no mixed matrimony at the end of the 19th century between Italians and Slovenian people. This is absolutely a fake news, but a lot of people believed in it. So it's extremely exhausting and complicated. And somehow it came up back to my mind, and I would like to throw it like that on the table, even if it's not a simple thing. My Antonio Gramsci and his, process of Americanization, individualization, and the idea that critical thinking, yes, we should teach critical thinking, but for God's sake, back in the days, we used to have a lot of institutions, even small town used to have parties and churches and association where people gathered together and used to fight to the blood on whichever kind of issue, and they were gyms of democracy. This is what we lack, at least in Western European countries, because the United States never had. So, and we saw the outgoing of this disaster. I think it's way more complicated than a small reform we can try to run in our small and sometimes not so useful institutions like universities.
Thank you. But we will wait. You can respond to him, but
I just wanted to respond to Gramsci. Gramsci, a left-wing thinker, which is very much used as a manual today in nationalist, right-wing, extreme right-wing politicians. Because what Gramsci actually also wrote, that in order to create a consistent era, you need to take over institutions, right? Because institutions will create you a common understanding of the main values, the most important things in society. So what the authoritarian regimes are doing is close reading Gramsci. This is about left and right. So it is just all of a sudden melted.
Yeah. Cultural hegemony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we are gonna hear three or four other questions, and then we can have a last round of answers as well to comment to each other. Stephen?
Well, thanks everybody for this interesting panel, really, well, very linked to the Camel conference before, no, and I think here we have a lot of different level and different topics that are intertwined. For example, I was just wondering and asking you to, is like try to think about that first, and also Camel this morning said something about that. In the last part about what can we do, etc., because here is like a relation between science as an institution, the use of science by extremist groups, parties, movement, etc., but also then democracies and how democracy works. And so I think here links to what you explained before. One is also, well, state and institution could and usually should, and they do, take decision about science. So the vaccine, for example, the state decide, well, or the Minister of Health or whatever, that people should take the anti-COVID vaccine, but a lot of other vaccine, of a lot of things, no? Or because maybe in the center of a city, no more car should, in these streets because of the pollution, etc., etc. So finally, science and politics, no, very strong related, and the relation created between them depends on what is our conception of democracy. Because the point is that scientists should decide because politicians, they don't know about that. So finally, it's not a democracy. No, I want to say in theoretical terms. But it's politicians that are elected, well, where democracy existed and still existed, not in Hungary nowadays, where they are elected by the people through, etc., etc. Okay, well, this is, I think, one point, no, that is interesting talking about science and extremist narrative. The second point is like, the conception of science as an institution, the conception, I want to say, and the perception by a part of people that is linked also, I think, to the distrust through science that you have. So we have a wave of distrust, again, related to politics, political parties, government, parliament, etc. Finally, this wave of distrust, because of a perception that is quite right, if you want, that science is also an institution, is why I should believe scientists. No, I'm not justifying that. No, and I think is linked here with the concept of post-truth. That is not only, and I think this is interesting also, talking about vaccine, and the distrust to vaccine, etc. That is how post-truth is related. And so the distrust for science is related to postmodernism as a consequence of postmodernism and the end of the big Weltanschauung to understand the world, and I think is crucial. But as Lee McIntyre explained in that interesting book about post-truth, that also the changing since the beginning of the 80s of the media system. And so because of a 24-hour channel, you need a debate, a lot of debates, and so you need that people are engaged in the debate and they don't change the channel. And so one position and the other position. And one position, for example, about tobacco or about oil pollution or etc., etc. There is a scientific consensus about them. But maybe there's 2 or 3 scientists that they are not agree. And finally, if you take a look at the debate on the TV channel, you have the 2 positions. But one is 97% of the scientific community and the other the 3%. But then, so I think this, and sorry, and then I close. The third consideration that I want to do, and is more maybe a question, is a link final to what is extreme. Because Camille also, and I think is crucial this, because if we wanted to have a consensus to considering what is extremism, what's extreme, and I want to ask, so science could be extreme or extremist. I want to say taking a look at the history, yes, because eugenetics. Racial theory of the 1 century ago or before, etc., etc. But also nowadays, Camille, mostly this morning talk about some of the new discovery in technology and the scientific battle between state to have artificial intelligence, etc. I think also there are scientific discourses that are supposedly with proof, scientific proof, that could be considered extremist if we have a democratic conception of relations between man and humankind. So where is the red line there? No. Well, it's a lot of things, and maybe it's not clear
And who sets the red lines?
Exactly.
Okay, so
That's,
as Stephen said already some things I wanted to say, so it will be easier, about this distrust and how this wave of distrust then reached, I would say, the science. And it's what you say about Eastern Europe. I could, it's will be also the case in, would say, for East Germany, because in the COVID crisis you could see there is a link between this already rooted distrust against institutions that has to do with the past, of course, and distrust against anti-COVID measures. And there was really, and you could see that some activists from 1989, it was a minority, but was then participated in these demonstrations against anti-COVID measures and makes their. So you already talk about it, and I wanted to react also to what Yuri said about the historian, and he explained, but nobody believes it, and I think it really has to do with the fragmentation and the evolution of public sphere and media system. Because last year I had a seminar about memory culture and such things, and I watched. Conference of Henri Rousseau, is a well-known historian who works on these topics, and he said, and it was about the historian in public space and how its status and evolve. And he say, no, we are in such news channels, we are in competition with some experts about everything and editorialists and something like that, and in social media, and everybody can give their opinion, and we are all on the same level, and nobody makes a difference. And that's a problem, because what the historian said is considered as on the same way as the opinion of somebody. and on the channels, I thought about CNews in France. You have what matters is the clash of the opinion, but at the end, you have the feeling that every opinion is on the same level, and not that maybe 3% of the scientific community has this opinion. I think that's really a problem, and that increased, I would say, with the fragmentation of social media. And I think the COVID crisis increased this phenomena too, because the people were at home and there were no dialogue. And what you say, it was Matteo, I think, about this lack of public space for public debates with people who have different opinions, and not people who think the same. So I think that's problem of legitimation, discredit or distrust and delegitimation of the scientist. And maybe, because it's difficult in such debates or in social media to transmit really complex, I would say, things, and science is complex. And a last consideration was about COVID crisis. It was a personal opinion. I thought the problem was, at the beginning, we didn't know a lot of things. And as you said, science progresses, and sometimes we don't know, and it changes. And the politicians maybe hadn't the courage to say we don't know, and say something like in France, we don't need masks now at the beginning, and then 1 month later, we need masks. And I think it was really, because it really damages, because you have to accept that, sometimes we don't know things. And I think it's the case for us too, that what we teach may change maybe, and that we should accept that we don't have all the answers. And I think that's something that we, the scientific community, sometimes tends to forget, and maybe not to give, to recognize.
No. So, as exciting as this is, we have maximum 8 minutes to answer these questions, and I'm pending other 2 questions. So, should we give preference to answer this, and then we hear, or we hear very briefly? Very good. And Camille was before, and then yes, please. We can open all the discussions and keep them going in lunch. So please go ahead. let's sit together.
Okay. So, to Katalin, I was a little bit puzzled. I'm a little bit puzzled and trying to wrap up my head about
The microphone.
how do you conceive the relationship between liberalism and science? Because on the one hand, you say, well, the liberal language, you buy into it, but it's not really valid anymore somehow. But then you define yourself as a staunch liberal. And I don't know exactly how to understand how you conceive the relation between the two.
Yeah.
I must say that if you understand liberalism as in this last answer, you seem to suggest in relation to a question to alternative science, I would be very staunchly against. I mean, it's true that science is a fallible enterprise, but there is no such thing as alternative science. And actually, you gave the example of the vaccine. It's true that it was accelerated, but they followed all the scientific protocols in an accelerated way. And also, it was very, very clear from the beginning of the period of vaccination that the problems of the vaccine were more than minimal. So I don't think that there is a scientific debate there. So as a liberal, you can say, well, actually, you can have other position because. So I'm a little bit skeptical about it. But I see you already disagree. So I'm happy. I'm happy that you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're gonna. Yes. Please.
Well, I just want to take a little bit the debate here, what you have commented about the institutions, the scientific institutions. I think that when we were in the lockdown, we saw those scientists as maybe authorities, to just people recommended some, some rules to be in health. So I think that maybe see them as authorities related them as institutional politicians. So maybe it's there the lack of credibility of them. Also because I think we built this kind of society when if we have a degree, we have like a kind of status. And if someone is maybe recommended as something and he has like a degree and we see him as or her as a superior, we tend to not trust in them. Yeah. And maybe it's here just the problem of maybe in the case of the pandemic for doctors, or maybe what you were talking about the historians, that maybe if we are talking about something and we don't react this trust in us, is because we build like this kind of society built on a status that it really hasn't much importance in that way. And that's it.
Thank you. So we will have a round of answers. Yes, Katalin, do you want to?
Liberalism. So I will start with Camille. No, we are all political animals, even though that we are academics, right? So we need to make transparent that where we are coming from, what are our worldview, because our worldview, our values, our understanding of the world, the most important things, will definitely have an impact how you select your methodology, your theories, what kind of data you are using. I'm talking about social sciences, and social sciences is about debate. Without debate, we don't progress, right? So no, I will discuss more likely entrepreneurship than equality, social equality, right? Because it is closer to home, right? So what I meant also about the anti-vax is that in the middle, when it started all over, I mean in 2020, was it 2021? Then it was a debate that we don't know how well it was tested, and it was an academic debate also. So we don't know where is this new vaccinations and how it was experimental and how it was, grounded. So that was, I refer to that, not now. We know all of it, right? So it's not that. To Stephen, what is democracy? Because democracy, from political science point of view, is a process, right? Everyday process.
Beautiful.
So, for example, our liberal democratic understanding is embedded in a contradiction. Is it liberal, or is it democracy? Is it individualism, or is it about the community, right? So, and not to talk about all other attributes, conservative liberal democracy, or I don't know, illiberal democracy, or sovereign democracy. So the question is that we are making, and this is exactly the same with extremism. This is a process, right? It is evolving. So in this sense, because it is evolving, it is difficult to earmark to academia, because academia is also evolving. So in this sense, yes, you are right, we are living in post-truth, but I would say we are living in a parallel truth. So, yes, academia is divided. Academia is divided because it is polarized already within. So we are fighting about each other. We are just to talk, just as an example, in the GDR, when communism collapsed, all the researchers from the GDR university institutions were purged because they have the wrong truth, right? And there came the Westies who will give you the right truth. Huh? So, and this kind of purging is also continuing, especially during crisis. So, yeah, social media, once upon a time, it was about democracy, right? How it turned out. But I stop here. Sorry.
I feel so terrible for stopping the debate. Are you sure? Yes? Okay. 5 minutes, please. So if you think, maybe Matteo can start, because we have the chance afterwards as well with...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will try in 2 minutes. I'll try to be
I appreciate that so much.
extremely effective. So, what is extremism? I think that extremism most of the time is something which is involved with violence, which is something that we didn't mention yet. I mean, extremism is most of the time something that is connected with violence, because I can disagree with that, with every one of us, with every one of you, sorry, but I become extreme, but this is one of the way in which we can frame it, when violence is involved. Any kind of violence, I'm not simply thinking about physical violence. The public sphere and the social media, you are right, Katalin, what happened, they were about democracy. It happened that we do not participate anymore. And this is what democracy is for an historian. From an historical point of view, the enlargement of the space of participation. Public sphere created many different spheres of participation, but they are closed. So I connect myself only with people that are already agree with me. And this is one of the problems we do have, and the lack of institution, like I was referring to parties, association, and whatever, in what we call the civil society, is one of the big dilemma of our times, because otherwise the public sphere is fragmented, multiplicated enormously, but is homogeneous. And let me quote Carl Schmitt, can we have politics without clash? I mean, not a violent clash, but at least some healthy disagree. I think we cannot. I think we cannot. I mean, so maybe it's a bit too much Laclau oriented, these kind of things, but still, I think we need it. And we don't have gym anymore. We don't have spaces anymore where we can happily clash without violence, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Sergi.
Even quicker than Matteo.
Let's go.
About science and restrictions. Yes, so we live in democracy, so we have elections, and I think it's really hard to do certain things when you have an uproar of people claiming the end of restrictions. So even if science recommends that you do not enter with the car to the center of the town, maybe it's hard to do that, considering that you maybe have an election 1 year from here and you will be permanently attacked. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm sure it's something they think about before putting a restriction or not putting a restriction. And to Natalie, really quickly, again, I have to say that I think that a lot of people will enjoy the afternoon's session about the circulation. But I want to talk about algorithms and social media algorithms, because this is completely obscure. We don't know how they work, really. So, for example, I mean, for academical, sometimes it's really useful, because when you are studying extremisms, you just follow an extremist account, and don't worry, you'll have the rest of the work done, because every extremist, every other extremist related to that will appear in your screen. So, yep. Bubbles of information start to form, where there's a popular concept that it's called, it's not a nice word, but it's called the circle jerk, in which the members of the same group interchange their opinions, which are the same, to reinforce one each other. But they don't leave that bubble. So they reinforce every time, and every time, and every time, and every time, and they radicalize every time more, every time more, every time more. And every time that happens, it's harder for us to de-radicalize them. So it's constant back and forth, yeah.
I will take up on that concept in the roundtable after. Thank you. So, yeah, 3:15. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, online. Yep. So now we have a lunch break. Thank you so much for so much implication and participation. We see each other at 3:15 as well for those that are online. Thank you again.